Action Station, 1370 WOCA.
WOCA.
Diamonds in the sunset, now your time has come.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. I have been so looking forward to the interview we're about to conduct, and you'll see why in just a second. I grew up on Long Island. I went to New York City, frequently, and you don't. If you've ever lived there, you don't see the Statue of Liberty every time you go into the city. It's obviously a little bit out of the area. It's in the water. How come I don't hear you? There you are.
There I am.
But I did. I mean, as a kid, I remember going with my parents to the statue, and it's one of those things when you live near something, you don't see it as often. Like everybody around here doesn't get to Disney World very much, but as an adult, I went with my son, trying to teach him about the statue, and I think I got so much wrong. I was not the best tutor or mentor or teacher when it comes to the Statue of Liberty. I mean, I think the general gist of what it represents, I got right. The Emma Lazarus sentiments in the poem that is on the pedestal, right? I've always loved that, by the way. And, even in light of this immigration thing, this controversy happening, I still believe in what that represents. But there's so many things we got wrong about this statue. Elizabeth Mitchell is on the phone, and she has done her homework, and I hope I remember everything she says and has written in the book. The book is called Liberty's Torch, The Great Adventure to Build the Statue of Liberty. Elizabeth is on the phone. Good morning, Elizabeth Mitchell.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
This is, I think our listeners, if we gave them a test, I think they'd fail.
Well, I would have failed, too, before I started writing the book.
Yeah. I had so many things wrong. I can't tell you what I had wrong. I thought a guy named Eiffel built it.
Well, Eiffel built the interior structure. He's the same one who did the Eiffel Tower, but that's just the scaffolding. The actual statue was made by Frederick Auguste Bartholdi.
See? And who knew that name? Do you even know? Does that name even...
I know.
Well, and what's the biggest misconception about the statue? I already know it because I've read the book, but you tell the listeners.
I think there's two big ones. One is that, I was taught that it was a gift from the French government to the American government, but it turns out that wasn't the case at all. Really what happened was this artist, Bartholdi, decided he wanted to build a colossus for a harbor, and he came to America just and cold pitched it to us. I mean, he was a lone wolf when he came here. The second one is he designed it originally for Egypt, and that deal fell through after he had already gone there and shown them the models. So we were the second choice in a way for this design.
Wow. Okay, but the design represents liberty. We are liberated, or at least we were back then. I don't know. I mean, was Egypt a liberated place at that time?
Well, it was the same. It was the same female figure holding up a torch in her arm, and same sort of stance. And she was wearing the long robe dress. But in the one for Egypt, it was supposed to represent a female slave because the Khedive, the leader of Egypt at the time, had abolished slavery, and so it was supposed to represent that sort of freedom. And it was going to stand at the mouth of the Suez Canal, which had just been built. So when he brought it over to America, he put the crown with the rays coming off of it and made it a little more Roman looking, and then that became our Statue of Liberty.
I got you. Okay, and the poem, I mean, the poem kind of gels it all, doesn't it? But when did that happen?
Well, oddly, that actually happened in the last couple of years before the statue was unveiled, and it was part of a fundraising effort. There was a woman in New York who decided to gather all the art she could find for one big exhibition, and the ticket sales would go towards the statue. It was, there was no Metropolitan Museum of Art or anything, so this was a big deal. She also asked writers to contribute, and Mark Twain was one of them, but the other one was this poet, Emma Lazarus. And Lazarus at first didn't want to do it because you get the feeling she thought the whole project was a little cheesy or something. And then she...
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then she came back with the poem, and that actually only gained fame well after everyone's, her death and Bartholdi's death.
Elizabeth, I want to ask you if you would come with me to my next Thanksgiving gathering. Do you mind? Because I have a feeling that I'm going to try. This is going to come up, I have a feeling I'm going to be contested, and people are going to argue with me.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you there.
Okay. Let me get a Skype set up, and I can handle them all.
Can you imagine that? Everybody's arguing with it. Hold on a second, Elizabeth. I know you're busy with your turkey, but can we settle something once and for all?
That's right.
And whenever it gets too contentious, I can just say, "There's a problem with the connection."
So on that note, have you had this? I mean, are you getting people who are challenging your what you're writing?
Well, what's interesting about it, and this is sort of the way I felt when I was working on it, is that in a way it's a kind of more beautiful story. I mean, this is a guy who came here. He's it's a very, in a way, an American story. The individual comes and champions this idea, and it's not like it takes away the meaning that the statue came to have and still has for us. I mean, it still represents liberty and all that, but it's just that it's a little more, it makes more human sense. I mean, how many times do governments just, come up with these schemes like this? It always has to be an individual making the thing happen.
Do you know, there's maybe a romantic part of me too that feels that this was God's intent. There's this whole part of me that says it wasn't meant to be in Egypt.
Yeah. No, I think even Bartholdi himself. I mean, he had funny feelings about America. Sometimes he loved us. Sometimes he thought we were, terrible bores and everything. But he ultimately, I think, felt the same way. That it was, when he saw it finally, he said, "This is where it was always meant to be. This is beyond anything I could imagine." So it's, I think he felt that destiny too.
And you had pointed out to us that the original color had changed over the years also.
The strangest thing about that is that, copper, even then people had been using copper, and copper would turn this greenish color from the patina of the weather on the copper. But for some reason, when people were writing back and forth about the statue, they never seemed to consider this idea that it would turn a light green. And in the end, that helped it, because at one point, the U.S. government only accepted the statue thinking it was going to be a lighthouse. And when they couldn't light it, yeah, I know. And then they couldn't light it brightly enough to actually make it serve as a lighthouse. So there was all this wrangling to just get it lit so you could see it at night, and the green helps that, because if it had been the dark copper, you wouldn't get a reflection.
We were speaking to Peter Max, and I hope you're not going to tell me that this is an untrue story, but we were. Do you know who Peter Max is, first of all? The artist? The artist?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we were speaking to him, and he was telling us how he was looking at the Statue of Liberty when it was starting to fall into ill repair. Is that how you say that? And he contacted, I think he contacted Nancy Reagan and said, we got to fix this. And she said, well, why don't you take this on as a project? And then he contacted, what's the guy's name from Chrysler again?
It was Lee Iacocca.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's obviously more recent than the history you cover in the book, but... Tell me that's true. Is that true?
Okay, I can believe that.
Peter told us the right story. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't study that particular period very deeply, but that sounds reasonable. Yeah. See, again, the individual. It wasn't just
Well, and the reason I brought it up is because of the copper. So the copper not only turns green, but it eventually needs to be replaced.
Well, think about it. Think of how bad your bike would get if you left it out in the rain, and that's a metal that isn't even as volatile as copper. So it's standing out there in the sea breezes with the salt air and everything else, and so it's kind of astounding that the thing is doing as well as it is. And that repair job they did in 1986 was key. So it's both the copper itself is will decay, but also there were iron bracings against it. At one point they were really worried, because if you put those two metals together with the salt air, you could create a battery, they said, of unknown proportion. So it could have just exploded, basically.
Oh, wow. Do you know, I've been inside. Have you been inside the statue?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
As a child more, though.
So do you remember the big, gigantic nuts?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. How did they turn them? I mean, how do you turn a gigantic nut?
Well, the work in the whole. It's an interesting question. The whole process was unbelievable. I mean, not only were they doing that, but the rivets are only an inch apart. So, I mean, think of how many rivets we're talking about. And so there were basically 50 workers over in France. There were 100 workers here, and they had. I mean, just to make the thing, they had to build build first a wood structure, then a plaster structure, then another wood structure,
Wow.
then hammer the copper.
Wow. It is fascinating. The book, again, is called Liberty's Torch. Elizabeth Mitchell has done an unbelievable job. How did this come into your lap? What brought you to this?
To this, I know. Well, I was in the New York Public Library and researching something else in the manuscript division, and this was years ago, and I noticed they had that Bartholdi's diary and his letters to his mother from when he first came to America in 1871. And so I thought, oh, that could be interesting. Let me look at it. And it turns out, you're reading the account of basically a guy coming to pitch this concept he has. He doesn't have anyone backing him really in France. He has a couple of friends who know he's coming. But he was, and the reaction was so funny. I mean, the Americans, he keeps showing his models, and they look at it with cold indifference, and he packs up quickly and leaves, and, he can't get anyone interested. So anyhow, that was fascinating to me. And then his personality is just so funny. He's both, one of the best writers I've ever seen. He gets himself involved in all sorts of adventures, but he also has this peevish quality which makes him kind of, amusing to watch, kind of like Louis C.K. of the French artist world.
Oh no! Can you speak French? Can you read French? Or?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I was in high school, I got to junior year, and I said I didn't want to take it in senior year, and so there were moments when I'd be in the archives like praying to the gods of translation. But it ended up, I can read well enough that I know what I'm looking at, and then if I wanted a really fine translation, I would give someone the paragraphs just to to get it cleaner. So it worked, but it was hard.
Well, when the statue was brought over here, did the engineers and some of the construction workers from overseas come over here to supervise the total construction and placement?
Well, actually, there's also funny things about that because, first of all, there was a point where Bartholdi was saying, I'm not even coming over to take a look at it because he was started getting involved in other things, and the people in America were writing him letters saying, are you kidding me? You have this 300-foot statue that's being put up, and we need you here. So anyhow, he came over, but also the French. There was a lot of, American workers feeling that they understood the whole thing a lot better than the French workers, so they sent the French workers home. But in the end, when they were putting it up, they finished, and they had about a huge piece of copper left over, and they had no idea where it came from. And my only theory is that it might have been from the arm, because the arm was put in originally 16 inches off the angle, and it caused a lot of problems with the stability of the arm.
And obviously some of the design of the tablet. I mean the date 1770, whatever it says on there, right? I mean that was obviously put there because this was an American thing, right?
Yeah, it was when he originally had different ideas of what it was going to represent, that it might be the end, to commemorate the end of the Civil War or end of slavery. But then when he saw that there was going to be a big celebration here for the 100th anniversary of the country, and we were going to have the World Expo here for the first time, he set the date on that tablet to be the anniversary, so it'd be kind of a fundraising thing too.
Elizabeth Mitchell is our guest. Her book is fascinating. It's called Liberty's Torch: The Great Adventure to Build the Statue of Liberty. Lots of what you think you know about the statue is not true, or is partially true. We do have the phone ringing off the hook, so I hope nobody's going to argue with you too bad.
This will be good training for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm going to prepare here. All right, let's take the first one. Good morning. You're on the air with Elizabeth Mitchell.
Good morning, Larry. This is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Elizabeth, thank you so much for doing this. This is really a great interview. And I know I love the Statue of Liberty. She's one of the few women I'd leave my wife for. And I wonder if you could tell us about the experience of what it used to be like going up to the torch and everything. Because I know that closed, and when that closed, I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
The torch actually has barely had any time that it was open. They had to close it right around World War I because an ammunition depot exploded over in the New Jersey side, and it caused instability to the torch, so they just stopped letting people up. But then you hear great accounts of, there was a family that lived on the island up until I think even Hurricane Sandy. I mean, they always had someone there, and and the teenage boys would sneak up into the torch, to impress their friends. But it's always been a problem. Even when the accounts of the people who first went up to look out over, to see New York from that height for the first time ever, they talk about how it's swaying so dramatically that it was.
Wow!
Yeah.
I've had a few people tell me they went up there, so I'm going to have to challenge them now. World War One.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they have it. There's some people you come across people who got up there because during the renovation or something they got to do it. There was one I talked to a photographer who was allowed to go. Into it briefly to photograph from there, and a few others that probably don't want to be outed.
So when it was first put up, was it taller than any of the buildings in Manhattan?
Yes, definitely. And the one funny thing, I think, because the book is all, these egos competing against each other the whole time. Joseph Pulitzer, the newspaper man, was the person on the American side who really got the fundraising done here, and he kind of did it as a scheme to boost the circulation of his paper. But as soon as the statue was done, which he had given his lifeblood to make happen, he builds his Pulitzer building, and he made sure that it was a few feet taller than the Statue of Liberty.
Oh,
so,
wow. Wow. All right, let's go back to the phone. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're on the air with Elizabeth Mitchell.
Yes, good morning. See,
good morning.
Now, where the statue is, that island, was that island always there, or was that a man-made thing in preparation for the statue?
It does look sort of man-made, but originally it was just an oyster bed, and people used to go out there to collect oysters. And then over time, it was, it passed through private hands into the government's hands, and there was an army fort out there. So there's even a funny moment where when Bartholdi comes to New York and he's looking around at different locations, he even looks at Central Park as a place for possibly putting the statue, which would have been quite strange. But he goes out there and he says, mortifying afternoon. I talked to the colonel out there, and you can imagine how the colonel would receive the news that this random Frenchman had just arrived on his shore to pitch the idea that the fort would go away and he would have this huge woman statue standing there.
Oh, wow.
So and at one point it was also the site of all public executions in the United States. So there's a lot of
really?
there.
Oh, gee.
I know.
So it's in New York Harbor, but that's actually New Jersey. Isn't that island actually New Jersey property?
It's actually national land.
Oh, national.
Yeah.
Oh, that settles the argument. It's not
exactly.
It's neither New York nor New Jersey.
Yeah. So Bartoli had to get Ulysses S. Grant to authorize the use of the island for the.
I'm going to remember that. Is Ellis Island the same thing? Is Ellis Island also considered national?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's national too, and Governor's Island as well.
When they did the fundraising for the statue, was it all private funding?
Well, in France there was a bit of sort of municipal, like Paris gave some money, and there was a bit of national funding, but not very much. Over there, he started off pitching it as a thing of give money out of the patriotic feeling of France towards America, but that didn't work very well. So he started just running entertainment. So he had you could go up into the head when it was at the expo there in Paris. You could go to a diorama where you walk in and you think you're in New York Harbor, and the lights and the painting and everything else gives that impression. That was very popular with people. Over here, it was mainly that running the names in the newspaper that Pulitzer did. He said, if you give a penny, I'll put your name in the paper. Everyone wanted to see their name in the paper. They buy the paper, circulation goes up, and he raises the money.
Do you know, I know a guy who has the Statue of Liberty's same profile. When I look at him from the profile, I say, you look like the Statue of Liberty from the side.
Interesting.
Can
you send me that?
I will. Okay. I'll send you that. But the statue is such a strong face, but it doesn't. But it's not a feminine face. Who is that?
I don't know if you're aware of my theory on this, but when I was doing the research, there's this story that goes around that says it's the face of his mother, but he never. And there's one account that says he confirmed it, but when you go back to the original record, no, he doesn't. Someone brings it up, and he just squeezes their hand, but doesn't say it's his mother. Now, he was such a showman and everything, and so good at publicity. I think he would have said it's my mother because everyone would feel really warmed in the heart about that. I actually, when you examine the photos, I think it's his brother, because his brother was this guy who was his idol when he was growing up. He was a very smart guy. He showed artistic talent before Bartholdi did, and his brother went mad, and so Bartholdi had to take his brother and institutionalize him, and then visited him almost weekly and would just sit with him, and sometimes the brother would be almost catatonic, sometimes
really? And then he said to him, "Oh, by the way, I've honored you. Look at this." And he said, "You made me a woman? You put me in a dress?"
Well, if you really examine on the cover of my book, you can look at that face, and it really is it's not very feminized, really.
No.
There's a little bit of,
Well, you know what?
as
a kid, I always thought that the statue looked like George Reeves from Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's just Superman.
What was there any religious backlash from that? Because we learned from your book that the spikes wasn't supposed to be a crown; that it was supposed to be a halo.
Well, I think that the crown. It's actually I believe he's using it as a reference from the Apollo that was in Rhodes back in ancient times. There's artist renditions that show it having the rays coming off because it represents the god of the sun. So I think that was his reference. And also there was a piece that was above the first World Expo he'd ever been in 1855 that had that same figure representing France. So I think that's where it came from. Bartholdi himself became a Freemason, and a lot of the people involved in making the piece were Freemasons, but that was essentially like almost the religion of the time. It had the same tenets, basically, of, say, Christianity or what have you, but it just was more of a, kind of practical, you have to achieve in this world kind of thing.
So the fact that we consider it a gift, but yet there was money raised to get it, it's kind of contradictory, isn't it?
No, I know. I find that really odd that never was really... It's really a collaboration, and that's, in fact, how Bartholdi thought it would work. And they did all these, twisting of the language to make it seem as if it was going to be, just a straight-out gift. But America ultimately raised more money to make it than the French did.
It's very humbling to look at that statue every time I see it on television or in books. And I was just recently in New York with my family. I mean, you look at it and everything goes quiet because you know what it represents and how we hope that our country stays the way it is.
Yeah, no, I think that if you think about America without it, I mean, then we would only have the flag as our symbol. This is a human face, so it sort of suggests that's what we care about, in this country, or what we hope to care about. And then, having that, he picked out. We could have thought that, if life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he picks out liberty, and that keeps being something that people can reference. It's like a giant Post-it note or something to the country to remember that.
Well, for the listeners, you're not going to be able to get Elizabeth Mitchell to come with you to Thanksgiving, so you need to get the book. She's not going to Skype with you either. No. And I have no delusions that she's going to Skype with me. So I have the book here. It is really a great keepsake, and get this as a book. Don't get this as you probably don't want me to say this, but I would prefer the book than the Kindle.
Yes.
I like Kindle.
I feel the same, actually. I mean, I think, first of all, they did a beautiful job with that cover.
Yeah.
It's lovely, right?
But but everything between the covers is pretty lovely also.
Oh, thank you.
What was I going to tell you?
A lot of research on your part.
Oh, I know what I want to tell you. It has nothing to do with this book, but a previous book you wrote about horse racing.
Yeah.
And the county we broadcast from is a big horse racing.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, you know.
I was excited when I saw where I would, who I'd be talking to, because, WOCA is, extremely important in the horse racing world. So, I wrote a book set in the world of horse racing. It was mainly about Chris Antley and Charismatic and 99.
Elizabeth, my screen can only hold 9 boxes of phone calls, and I've got all 9 filled. Pick a number between 1 and 9. We'll give the book away.
Let's do 8.
8. Number 8 is the winner of the book, and here we go. Good morning. You've got the book. Who's this?
This is Pete.
Pete, you've got the book. It's Liberty's Torch.
Terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome. And it'll be waiting here at the station, obviously. Elizabeth, you know what's really good is the fact that the first time we had you booked, something happened and we couldn't get you on or something. And it was a 10-minute interview.
Yeah, very short.
So I'm so glad that this time we could talk to you at length. Not only was it a fun, fascinating topic, but you're a fun interview as well.
Oh, that's sweet of you to say. Thank you.
Where are you, by the way? Where are you right now?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Oh, so no wonder there's a big connection with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, I think but I sort of feel anywhere you live, you'd feel this way, right?
Yes,
even
you do.
Even when I was in,
maybe,
Connecticut.
yeah. So,
You're like, not really.
Well,
No, with me it
but
is.
let me ask you that. Let me ask you this, and I should know this, and it's kind of not really connected. But was Battery Park there when I was a kid? Was Battery Park always there, or was that something that was built later on?
It was always there. Actually, even the wall, the foundation of it had been built by the time Bartholdi was coming over.
Oh, okay,
And he actually thought that was a good location for the Statue of Liberty.
I love where it's at.
You sound like the people he pitched it to back then.
Yeah, I like it where it is. I can't imagine it anywhere else. Elizabeth Mitchell, thank you so much for being on the air with us today. Great interview.
Thank you. So fun to be there.
And
okay.
we need to move forward, and we'll be right back. Let's see. It's just about 11 o'clock. So what do we have next? Oh, Blanche Dudley. She's going to be on the phone. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, take care.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson getting a first-hand look at the problem of illegal immigrants during a trip today.
Secretary Johnson's trip to the border comes a day after he talked to lawmakers about the Obama administration's request for nearly $4 billion to help deal with the immigration crisis.
Fox Radio's Rachel Sutherland.
Republican